The Bellator cage touches down once again in Honolulu, Hawaii, the first of 2 loaded cards on consecutive nights. Making the final walk will be undefeated flyweight champion Juliana Velasquez, who will be making her second title defense against someone with championship fight experience, Liz Carmouche. A trailblazer in women's MMA, Carmouche has accomplished everything except for one thing: hoist a championship belt. And ever since debuting in Bellator, she's had a renewed sense of purpose and focus.
Now an overhand right. Wants it up, he back like she's in big trouble. Liz Carmouche piling it on. Kevin McDonald taking a close look. A lot of shots are getting in and it's over.
On the other side, Velasquez was tested in her first title defense, but she did not break.
And still!
Will the belt stay in Rio with the defending champion, or is there an upset brewing in paradise? We're going to find out Friday night, only on Showtime.
That's right, Bellator 278 underway tonight at 10 o'clock Eastern, live from Honolulu. Juliana Velasquez and Liz Carmouche headlining this one in the women's flyweight division. Tonight's card, the first of back-to-back nights of action down there in paradise. Luke Thomas, one of the hosts of Morning Combat, joining us now. It's about 2 a.m. Honolulu time, so we've still got plenty of time to talk about this one. Let's start with the fight we just mentioned. Odds makers think this is a close one, but Velasquez said on media day she thinks she's had tougher fights. Is she right, and is this hers to lose?
Well, she beat the previous champion, who was widely celebrated, Ilima-Lei Macfarlane, in order to advance to the position that she's in. You could argue that would be a tougher fight than this version of Liz Carmouche. I don't think that's necessarily all that crazy, but still, it's a pretty tough fight. And as you indicated, the odds being relatively close kind of speaks to that. I mean, here's the thing, though. Velasquez might have beaten a certainly a younger opponent, maybe somebody more closer to their prime. And I'm not going to say that Liz Carmouche is out of her prime per se, but maybe slightly on the other end of it. But what I would say is Liz Carmouche has something that a lot of Velasquez's previous opponents do not, which is grade A experience. Now, sometimes in that experience, she's prevailed and sometimes she hasn't. But remember, this is the part, she was one half, Liz Carmouche, of the first women's fight ever in the UFC when she fought Ronda Rousey, nearly submitted her from the back. And obviously she fought Valentina Shevchenko in Uruguay before she exited and went over to Bellator. So she's seen the very, very best of what 2 different weight classes have to offer. She's strong in both of them. Her nickname Gorilla is in no way accidental. She's quite physically gifted. And what I will also say is, listen, when she came over to Bellator for her first couple of fights, they were a little bit safe, a little bit, not defensive, but there just wasn't a lot going on. But in her last fight, she really stepped on the gas. So maybe she's turned back to that corner that had been somewhat missing previously. So toughest opponent, I don't know. Tough opponent, definitely.
All right, well, on day 2, Bellator's 279 gets underway. Chris Cyborg and Arlene Blenklow. This title fight for these two, is the third try at a title, the charm for Blenklow and a rematch with Cyborg?
I don't know, to be candid with you. I mean, here's the thing. As a general disclaimer for your audience, it should be known that even relative to boxing, MMA is wild and chaotic, right? There's just so many variables that you have to account for. Not just punches and kicks and takedowns, but also how was your weight cut? Have you slept well? I mean, what's going on with your team? Is there any kind of turmoil there? I mean, there's so many things that can derail or propel a fighter. I'll say this, if Cyborg is not on her game, this is a very wide open fight. Blenklow is experienced, including against Cyborg. She's been around the game a long time. She's strong. She trains with a good team in Jackson Wink. I mean, this is a very, very decorated and experienced competitor herself. But in her last fight with Cyborg, it was not especially close. Cyborg, even though she has aged and I think she's on the other end of her prime as well, she still is full of just absolute malice when she goes out there, and she's preparing like she always has. She's always in shape. She's always still got a chip on her shoulder, and she's still physically strong. She has a well-rounded game at this point. She can strike, she can wrestle, she can mix them in between. So listen, something just being honest with you and being honest with the audience, I would have to say that something would have to kind of be off for Cyborg. Is she hiding an injury? Was she not able to get her weight right? Blah, blah, blah. Something along those lines would have to be a part of the equation, I think, for Blenklow to have a legitimate chance. She's always got a puncher's chance, but when you just sort of stack up what is Cyborg good at, what is Blenklow good at, if they're both at their best, there's not a whole lot I can point to where I could say Blanco has a clear and obvious advantage. And so for those reasons, to me, this is Cyborg's fight to lose. But one note my co-host Brian Campbell always makes, and I made this point before the beginning of the year with Amanda Nunes, which was, listen, when you get someone at the top of their game, it looks to me like Cyborg is in full control of everything. But sometimes when you get to the top of the game, they can look the part, but all of that praise, all of that headlining action can sometimes go to their head a little bit. So again, if Cyborg is dialed in, it's her fight to lose. If not, this is wide open.
Cyborg has been dialed in lately, winning her last 5 fights. All right, in the bantamweight tourney, Juan Archuleta and Raufeon Stots, 2 guys staring mid-30s in the face. I know how that feels like, but age just a number in this one. Is this the most exciting fight of that bracket?
Ooh, that's a good question, because the other one, which we'll talk about in a minute, I'm sure, is also pretty good. But let's just say, if it's not number 1A, it's 1B. I mean, you just can't get fighting a whole lot better than this. Juan Archuleta, a former champion who has been around forever, who has fought everyone they could throw at him in the Bellator, both bantamweight and for a time even for the featherweight division when he went up and took on Patricio Pitbull. That one didn't go his way, but you can just imagine the kind of gusto you have to go up a weight class and challenge the best fighter in Bellator history. And of course, he has his own decorated abilities as champion. Here's a guy in Juan Archuleta, an indefatigable motor. This guy can go and go and go. On top of that, he has a sort of what I call a jousting striking style. He can stay on the outside and then he blitzes to the inside, or he'll blitz off at an angle. Very, very hard to deal with. Now, we saw in his last bout, or for Sergio Pettis, we saw in his last bout, he was able to deal with that kind of a thing when those two fought. But I don't necessarily know if Stots has that kind of sharpshooter ability. However, Stots, this is going to be a big test for him, right? For the interim weight class title, 5 rounds. This is going to be a lot of questions answered for him. But what we did see in his Magomedov fight was that this is a guy who can wrestle himself, who has dominant grappling, who can maintain positional control. So I would say this. I don't think Stots is necessarily a bad striker by any stretch of the imagination, but that style that Archuleta brings of blitzing and jousting, that may be a lot to deal with. And he's got great takedown defense, a former wrestler himself. If Stots can't get the takedown, or at least maintain positional control, or even have the takedown as a threat, this is going to be a tough fight for him. But what I do think will happen is these two guys are going to be going after it the entire time for 25 minutes. The question is, whose motor is going to quit on them just a little bit first? Archuleta has proven at the 5-round distance his motor is all there and then some. Stots could be too, but we don't know. We're going to find out tomorrow night.
The other fight you're referencing, Kyoji Horiguchi and Patchy Nix. So tell me what you like about that one then.
What is there not to like? 2 of the best bantamweights on the planet. Kyoji Horiguchi might have a claim to be the very best one. Here's what's so interesting about this. If you asked me who is the most talented guy in this tournament, I'm going to tell you it's Horiguchi by a country mile. The catch to that is he lost his last fight by vicious KO. And of course, the catch to that is he was winning every single minute of every single round right up until he wasn't. He ate a spinning back fist, and that's the way the game goes. This is what I mean when I say the game is chaotic and anything can kind of happen. Horiguchi was running a clinic on the champion before the champion just dug deep and found something that would work in a scramble moment, and it did. But Horiguchi sort of showed over the life of that fight he was vastly superior. So the question you have to ask yourself is, are there any lingering effects of the knockout, either physical or mental? Because a guy like Patchy Nix on paper, while a very good grappler, think of his last 5 wins, 4 of them are via stoppage. I mean, the guy just, and by the way, not just stoppage, submission. I mean, the guy's a submission machine. But to beat a guy like Horiguchi, everything has to be on point. So I'll say this, for Patchy Nix, who had a great win against James Gallagher in Ireland, he's going to have to show, I think, a level that he hasn't necessarily shown because he hasn't faced an opponent this good. For Horiguchi, what are the ghosts of the last KO loss going to do? Are they going to rally him, or are they going to sink him? No one really knows, because that was a really vicious loss. The last thing I'd say is he did have a loss via KO to Kai Asakura over in Ryzen, and then he came back and defeated Asakura by KO himself. So we've shown him to be resilient, but that last KO loss was nasty. This is his first fight back, 5 rounds. He's got a lot of work to do.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.